Well, good afternoon and welcome to Gedling Borough Council's Selective Licensing Residents Consultation event that's being broadcast live via Microsoft Teams. I'm Councillor David Ellis. I'm the Council's portfolio holder with responsibility for public protection. Part of my remit includes overseeing improvements in standards in private sector housing and tackling crime and antisocial behaviour. These three services in my portfolio are central to selective licensing and linked to a number of the Council's priorities around tackling crime and antisocial behaviour, improving health and well-being, and promoting a sustainable environment. The Council's core ethos is serving people, improving lives, which is at the centre of the proposals to introduce selective licensing to improve housing conditions and property management. This event is to provide further background information to residents on the Council's proposals to extend selective licensing of private rented homes in Carlton Hill, Colwick, Daybrook and Newstead Village. The proposals have been developed following a successful pilot of selective licensing in Netherfield since October 2018, and we hope you find the event informative and beneficial. You'll see from the agenda on the next slide that we'll have a presentation from the Senior Environmental Health Officer, Tom Southam, who'll run through some of the findings from introducing selective licensing in Netherfield. Following that, we have a presentation from the Food, Health and Housing Manager, Sam Palmer, who will present the proposal to extend selective licensing, and we'll go through how to formally respond to the consultation. The Council is keen to seek views during the consultation to inform its decisions. You can submit typed questions as we're going along by using the Microsoft Teams chat function. At the end of the presentation, we'll have the opportunity for a question and answer session, which will include the presenters and the Corporate Director responsible for this area of service, David Wakeling. If we run out of time, both unanswered and answered questions will be fed into the consultation process and be considered by the Council along with other responses to the consultation. I'll now hand you over to Tom Southam, who will talk more about the Council's experience of implementing selective licensing in Netherfield. Tom.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Okay, let me just see if I can get this working. Sorry. I can't change the slide there, Rob, can you? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Ellis. So yes, as you mentioned, my name's Tom Southam. I'm the Senior Environmental Health Officer and I oversee the selective licensing scheme that's been going in Netherfield. I'm just going to give you a background of what the scheme involves and basic findings and benefits that we found from running the scheme. We could go to the next slide, please. So just the basic background of the scheme. It was designated on the 1st of October 2018. It covers the whole of the Netherfield ward, and what it means is that all private rented dwellings within that area are required to be licensed. The team consists of one environmental health officer, that's myself, overseeing the project, and then two housing improvement and enforcement officers and a student placement officer that helps with the admin. To date, we have received 676 applications. Of those, 35 have been withdrawn, either because they weren't required, or because they were exempt, or because the owner has since sold the property. We have issued 466 licences to date. We've carried out 256 property inspections. We did have to halt the property inspections earlier this year because of the challenges presented by COVID-19 and safety issues, which has meant that that figure has remained slightly lower. And we've taken enforcement action in relation to 13 dwellings for failure to apply for licences. Following those property inspections that we've carried out, 220 of those properties, which equates to 86% of those inspected, had issues whereby the landlord was required to carry out repair work. So this is standards of disrepair within properties that fall below the national standard for properties, and where we've said to them that they need to carry out the works to bring it up to that minimum standard for safety. 33 properties have been identified as having imminent risk, which is issues within the house where the potential risk to occupants and visitors to the house is such whereby immediate action needs to be taken to safeguard those people. And that equates to 13% of the properties that are inspected. Overall, we have improved 101 properties, so that's where works that we've required have been carried out. The 33 properties that I just mentioned on the previous slide with imminent risk, they were all resolved there and then because the risk was imminent. They need to be dealt with immediately. We've seen an increase in landlord accreditation across the area, which has improved things. It's better for the area the more landlords that are accredited, basically. We hope that that would increase compliance and landlord knowledge across the area by getting involved with accreditation processes. We've made 17 safeguarding referrals. So as part of the licensing process, we're working closely with partners, bringing other partners into the process, sharing information to try and better safeguard tenants and properties and neighbourhoods going forward. I can't go into details of the specific referrals, but they generally tend to be referrals to Notts Fire Service, who have a few services that they offer. One of them is it's called a Charlie model, where it identifies residents that are considered to be high risk, work together with those to make sure that an officer's going out and offering support to tenants that are considered to be high risk of fire. Notts Police, the community safety team at Gedling Borough Council, who deal with antisocial behaviour and safeguarding issues, and the health and housing coordinators who work with the NHS and with the hospitals to try and help people move back into their homes and reduce the burden of beds within the NHS. We also carry out fortnightly local operations meetings with partners that consist of the police, Gedling Homes, and Notts Fire Service, where it's another example of where we share information, share intel, and we will be made aware of various different projects that the police are running in the area and vice versa, so that we're all working together and singing from the same hymn sheet. So I'm just going to run through some of the common problems that we've found in houses in the next few slides. The most common one, certainly the most common one that we found that relates to imminent risk, is the risk that fire presents. So the main issues in houses that relate to fire is a lack of detection or no protected means of escape. It's hard to illustrate this in pictures, so I've used the floor plan of one property that we encountered. You can see the route from the bedroom out of the front door is through the kitchen and then through the living room. So if we're following the fire safety guidelines for residential properties, you shouldn't have to exit a dwelling through another high-risk room. Kitchen and living room both being high-risk rooms here, so that was a major problem. This was all down to the layout. You can see they do have smoke detectors there, but if there was a fire, then the people within that bedroom would effectively be trapped, especially if it was in the kitchen. So this is an example of one thing that we've been doing to rectify those problems with no protected means of escape in properties, and we're changing windows. So the left one is how it was when we first inspected it, and the right one after our intervention. Top opener on the left and then a bottom opener on the right. The bottom one is a compliant escape window for fire, so that if the means of escape down the stairs and through another room, then the occupants have an alternative means of escape should a fire start. Now this is taken from a property which is very indicative of Netherfield, which is a mid-terrace, 2 up, 2 down, where you come down the stairs and you go through a dining room and then out the front lounge. There's a lot of properties that we have found in Netherfield where they don't have escape windows on the first floor, and in effect those tenants are living in potentially dangerous situations upstairs if a fire was to start. Another common one that we find is electrical hazards. Here's just a few pictures of the ones we found. So, I mean, these are some of the most extreme. All of them have bare wires showing. Clearly, if you touch bare wires, then there's a risk of electrical shock. Electrical hazards also cover disrepair to plug sockets, not necessarily hanging off the wall, but cracks and things like that, or where appliances have blown in the socket, creating a problem, potential risk of burns or electrocution, also linked to potential fire hazards as well. Damp and mold tends to be the hazard that gets the most coverage in the media, and that's certainly something that we found as well in Netherfield. You do tend to get it quite a lot in the old style properties with the single layer of brick and a lack of insulation. It is sometimes down to the fact that the house is the way it is or the way the tenants are using it, but it is also often down to defects with the property. So it could be defective damp proofing or water leak, which you can see on that picture. The bottom left picture is a water leak from the bathroom above. A defect to the fabric of the building. So if you've got issues with your guttering or pointing, missing, things like that, moisture coming in, and inadequate heating provision. So it's all well and good saying, or potentially the argument saying that it's because of how the tenants are using it, but if the tenants can't adequately heat the house, then they're going to inevitably suffer from things like damp and mold, which is what you can see on that bottom right picture there. And then that links in nicely with excess cold. Excess cold is a very common hazard amongst older type housing stock, which is generally what we see in the Netherfield area. Again, links in with the previous slide, poorly maintained or inadequate heating systems and disrepair to windows, as we can see here. Single glazed windows or disrepair to wooden framed windows make it very difficult for people to insulate their rooms and houses. Any heat that they're creating is going to escape and it's lost. You can see on the bottom two there as well, what we're finding is in some houses are inadequately heated by portable electric heaters, which cost a lot to run and not very efficient. And that's actually before and after on the bottom there, where we've worked with the landlord to upgrade the heating system to a gas central heating system with a radiator suitable for the size of the room. Falls on stairs and between levels. A hazard generally associated with children are the high risk group for this one. Defects that lead to this: disrepair to the stairs, or as you can see in this picture, open risers. It's not really that clear from this picture, but the risers are quite large on this, large enough for a child's head to fit through. Inadequate guarding in and around the stairs or at the top of the landing, and missing handrails. Another before and after there for the handrail at the top. Large gaps in the railings, not safe for children crawling around or messing around upstairs, and they've been changed there for guarding which is suitable, stops the potential for people to fall through it, and also is done in such a way where it discourages climbing. Another example of falls from height. This is a access to a flat over a flat roof, where when we went round, the guarding had been knocked down and there was no guarding between the entrance and a drop from a first story height there. So we worked with the landlord to get that fence reinstated to safeguard the visitors and the occupants of that property. So just to conclude and summarise the basic findings from the scheme from our point of view from running it in Netherfield, it's enabled us to increase the number of property inspections. Granted that this was slightly affected by COVID, but we still carried out far more inspections than we would have been able to had we not had the scheme. So more inspections resulted in more hazards being identified and more problems being rectified. Tenants, agents and landlords now more aware of what is expected of them and what is required of them. Quite a few conversations with tenants and also landlords and agents has given information to people that they didn't previously know. And that's no disrespect to agents or landlords. We can't always know everything, but we have found it quite useful from that point of view of improving knowledge. Advice provided by officers on relevant legislative requirements, responsibility and rights. Again, that's also been useful for agents, landlords and tenants. and 86% of properties are having issues identified, which is what I highlighted on the earlier slide. And that's a large percentage of properties that we're inspecting, and that helps to show the level of disrepair across the properties. But also landlords that probably thought that they were managing their houses effectively and keeping them well maintained, maybe not 100% sure of what the standards are. 86% of those properties falling below the standard. License conditions, as part of the license that we issue, it has a set of conditions. It's a prescribed set of rules which the license holder is bound by, and it's increased our power in able to bring about compliance. And if there is non-compliance, then we're in a much better position to rectify that with the landlord. And that brings me to the end of my presentation.
Okay, Sam, you're ready to go?
Okay, I've asked for to control the slides. Can I control? Thank you. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Tom. And as Councillor Ellis explained at the start, my name's Sam Palmer. I'm the Food, Health and Housing Manager. I'm going to give you a brief presentation to explain more about the Council's consultation into Phase 2 of selective licensing. So the presentation will cover what is selective licensing and when can it be introduced, what areas of the borough satisfy the government's guidance for introducing selective licensing, why the council is holding a public consultation and how to respond to the consultation. So selective licensing is a power passed down to local authorities by government through Section 80 of the Housing Act 2004. It introduces a requirement for all private rented homes in a designated area to be licensed from the council. A selective licensing scheme can last for a maximum period of up to 5 years, and prior to implementing a scheme, the council must have completed a public consultation, which is the process that we're currently undertaking at Gedling Borough Council. So our consultation has been running since the 12th of October through to the 4th of January 2021. So when can a scheme be introduced? It's only available in areas where there are a high proportion of private rented accommodation. So all of the 4 areas that we are considering today fall within that definition. And then the areas proposed must be suffering with one of the 6 following conditions. So these are poor property conditions, high levels of deprivation, high levels of crime, significant or persistent antisocial behaviour, low housing demand, high levels of migration. So if an area is suffering with one of those criteria, as a high proportion of private rented homes potentially can be considered for selective licensing. So this table here summarises the criteria that are satisfied within the council's proposal, which is found on the Have Your Say page of the website and the links that are shared with this presentation. So if I go through each of the 4 areas just in summary, the full details are in the proposal document, which is on the consultation webpage. But the first area to be considered is Carlton Hill. So Carlton Hill demonstrates the government's guidance for a significant and persistent problem with antisocial behaviour and also poor property conditions. So there's evidence, there was a police analysis report that we've got looking at 5 years worth of police and crime data across the borough, which flagged up these 4 areas. We've also looked at various data sets. So there's housing conditions data, deprivation data, antisocial behaviour, crime, levels of private sector housing across the borough. So we looked at these data sets, and as I say, Carlton Hill had significant and persistent problems with antisocial behaviour, poor property conditions. It's one of the areas of the borough that is one of 2 areas of the borough that's flagged up on the police's severity profiles, and they are high priority areas specifically for tackling problems to address antisocial behaviour. Carlton Hill ward is also the 2nd highest ward behind Netherfield in terms of requests for housing, complaints about housing conditions in the rented sector, and it's the 2nd highest ward in terms of enforcement. In the proposed area, we've had reports of disrepair in one in every 4 homes, every 4 rented homes. In terms of colic again flags up with high levels of antisocial behaviour, but also high concentrations of crime. Colic is in close proximity to the Neverfield ward, which is currently designated for selective licensing, and shares some of the similar challenges to the Neverfield area in terms of crime and antisocial behaviour, and also some similarities in housing stock. Colic has featured as a Priority Plus area as one of the top 15 affected areas for crime and antisocial behaviour in the borough, along with Neverfield. Colic also features in one of the 2 severity profiles I mentioned previously identified by police, and these were specifically brought in to address significant problems with antisocial behaviour. As with all these areas, there's a high volume of private rented homes and links that are evidence in the proposal document between antisocial behaviour and crime and the housing conditions in that and the properties in that area. So Daybrook features because there are high levels of significant and persistent problem with antisocial behaviour, high concentrations of crime and poor property conditions. So Daybrook is the 5th highest ranked ward in the borough per 1,000 residents in terms of antisocial behaviour and crime. And over the past 5 years, Daybrook has the highest volume of antisocial behaviour of the 4 proposed areas that we're considering in this table. Daybrook is the 3rd highest ward in terms of housing service requests and the 4th highest in terms of housing enforcement notices. Again, in terms of complaints, we receive reports about 1 in every 5 private rented homes in the proposed area. The final area is Newstead Village. This area demonstrates significant and persistent problems with antisocial behaviour, high concentrations of crime and poor property conditions. It's the 2nd highest in terms of the wards in terms of antisocial behaviour per 1,000 residents. And again, evidence is demonstrated in the proposal of how this links to the private rented sector. In terms of poor property conditions, 5% of all service requests across the borough are received from Newstead Village, and again 5% of enforcement notices served by the council are received or served in Newstead Village. We have received complaints about 1 in every 3 private rented homes in Newstead Village. So, next slide. This slide shows the proposal area for Carlton Hill, outlined in red. This can be searched on the Have Your Say webpage. There are some maps where you can zoom into property addresses and see the boundary a bit more clearly. This area is designed or defined using the data that I mentioned on the previous slide. A lot of analytics have gone in looking at the areas that are affected, and it spreads essentially from Carlton Hill, north of Carlton Hill within the Carlton ward, and it runs from Hooton Road at one end of Carlton Hill up to Lowwater Street at the other end, and includes the Honeywood Gardens estate. It should be noted that I've not mentioned on the table slide, but deprivation was one of the criteria that we considered when looking at the evidence. A lot of the deprivation data looked at borough or ward-wide designations, but it was preferred to make a more focused scheme that is more condensed rather than a full ward-wide scheme. So that was on the previous map and applies to all of these areas. Colic is outlined on this slide, again outlined in red. It covers the area to the north of Colic Loop Road, including Valeside Gardens and the length of Vale Road up to Balmoral Road at the north. So Daybrook, again shown on this slide. The Daybrook area outlined in red, it covers from Sherbert Road in the south and the area north of Sherbert Road all the way up to Sir John Robinson Way, and then from the west it takes in Oxclose Lane through to Nottingham Road on the east. Again, these areas can be zoomed in on the consultation page, and you can look in more detail where the boundaries lie. The last area is Newstead Village. So this covers the area sort of Tilford Road area to the north of the village, terrace property. So covers from Tilford Road to the north, up with the boundary with Hazelford Way Industrial Estate. Okay, so in terms of what the licensing scheme would include, there is a fee for licenses. So it runs, the scheme potentially runs for up to 5 years, and the license fee for non-accredited landlords would be £700 to be paid by the landlord, or for accredited landlords £585. So spread over the 5-year lifetime of the scheme, that equates to about £2.69 per week. In terms of the license, Tom's mentioned the experience in Netherfield and some of the findings. There are a number of license conditions that landlords are required to comply with. They're set out over 34 conditions over 6 headings. So there's gas and electrical and fire safety conditions, some around property management, tenancy management, tackling antisocial behaviour, change of details or circumstances, and licence holder training. So these are contained within the proposal document on the council's website, and there are requirements for landlords to comply with the licence conditions. How will selective licensing improve the proposal areas? So Tom's explained some of the benefits in Netherfield and the early improvements we've seen. It will allow for proactive inspections and site visits. It will provide dedicated staffing resource for regulated private rented housing. Tom's already outlined the property improvements in conditions to up to minimum legal standards, and also we're working with landlords to improve property management and agents. It requires good practice from all landlords. So the conditions that I've mentioned on the previous slide, they really instill good practice and make sure that that's widespread across the areas where licensing is introduced. It encourages collaboration and partnership working with organisations to address issues. So Tom's mentioned some of the referrals that we've served or issued to partner agencies to bring them together, improvements in our working with police to tackle crime and antisocial behaviour, some of the joint working and the intelligence that we're able to feed into that process. Also, it allows us to promote and signpost to other services that are available, such as grants or support services that may be of benefit either to tenants or to landlords, or just generally to improve the area. Okay. How to respond to the consultation. So it is on the Have Your Say page of the website. The direct web link is there on the slide. There is so there's the proposal document there, there's the maps, there's the evidence, there's also a questionnaire at the bottom of that page. So there's a number of key questions relating to the proposal and relating to the scheme and the council's seeking views from stakeholders to inform any decision making. So you can reply to that survey online. All survey answers will be considered and they will be analysed, and they will be fed into decision makers to fully consider the next steps following the consultation. Alternatively, you can submit comments in writing to the Public Protection Service at Gedling Borough Council. We don't have the resources to respond to these any written requests, but they will be fed into the consultation process, and they will be reported to decision makers for consideration. Okay, so that was whistle stop tour through the presentations that we have. We now have opportunity for an interactive question and answer session. So as mentioned by Councillor Ellis at the start, you can submit questions through the chat box function through Microsoft Teams for our panel of speakers to respond.
Hi Sam, so we've not had any questions so far. We've had some attendees, but I can't see if there's any at the moment. But I can't see any questions appearing at the moment. But we can always give it a minute or two.
As we've said, this is not your only opportunity to make comments. You can make comments through the council's website and the consultation section there, so you can make comments and ask questions through that. Any questions and comments will be taken account of in the decision making.
Okay. It doesn't look like we've got any questions online. So as Councillor Ellis has mentioned, you can submit your comments through the survey form on the questionnaire or in writing to the council. This will also be on the council's YouTube page, and we'll be making it available on the website for viewing afterwards. So I think on that basis, we'll look to draw the live broadcast to a close. So thank you for your time, and we'll keep you updated on the outcome of the consultation once decision makers have considered any representations or comments that are submitted. Thank you.